Would you rather be owned by your toxic coworker and let them make your life miserable? Or do you want to own them? The biggest mistake most people make when they're dealing with a toxic person at work is playing right into their trap. But smart people don't make this mistake. Smart people are not petty when they're dealing with a toxic person at work. They are strategic. They use 5 strategies that I am about to share to be unbothered by toxic people at work. The 4th one is my personal favorite. You'll want to make sure that you stay all the way to the end of this video because each of these is crucial when you're dealing with toxic people without losing sleep, stressing out, or finding yourself on the wrong side of office politics. The first thing smart people do when they're dealing with a toxic boss or a toxic coworker is they avoid a massive mistake that 90% of people make. This mistake hands all of their power over on a silver platter and guarantees they will suffer in a toxic work environment, even after they leave it. Smart people do not overanalyze the situation. Intellectualizing is a common reaction in a toxic work dynamic. The entire experience is what can only be described as discombobulating. You know the situation is problematic on so many levels, but at the same time, your toxic coworker or boss is gaslighting you to make you think that you're the problem. They're triangulating you to put you against your colleagues. And the worst part is, no one around you understands. They tell you to just brush it off, to validate that you haven't lost your mind and that the situation is as bad as you think it is. You analyze it. You stop your scroll at every video about a toxic workplace, which thank you, but you don't stop there. You go deeper. You've watched videos and read books and diagnosed the toxic person you work with at least one personality disorder, if not multiple. You've psychoanalyzed their motivations and the motivations of those that they manipulate, and you've externalized the problem. But overanalyzing the situation is a delay tactic. It gives you a false sense of control. What underlies it is a belief that if you can understand why they act this way, you can fix it. But here's the thing, no matter how much you know about them, understanding them is not going to solve the problem. Smart people don't get stuck trying to make sense of the senseless behavior of toxic people at work. They get to work protecting their peace. They don't ask, why are they like this? Instead, they ask, why does it matter to me? Smart people know the problem isn't the toxic person at work. It's what it's doing to you. Because that's how most toxic people at work win. They set you up and they expect you to walk into the trap. Smart people will never give them that satisfaction. And one of the ways they do that is by using the second strategy to deal with those toxic people at work. Have you ever been in a situation where a toxic coworker insulted you at work? Or maybe your toxic boss unfairly criticized you? Most people have the same knee-jerk reaction. Clap back. There is a reason why a video I made about shutting down your passive-aggressive coworkers has nearly 14 million views on TikTok alone. When someone insults you, undermines you, or treats you unfairly, you want to call them out. You want to be the rubber to their glue. But reacting is not winning. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone stoop down to their toxic coworker's level and come out on top? It's a tale as old as time. The toxic person says or does something shady, and you call it out. And the person who is held accountable and gets in trouble is you. The reason for this is simple. The toxic person is in control. Their behavior is the status quo, and you disrupting it makes you the problem. Let's face it, especially when you're dealing with a toxic person at work, you're dealing with office mind games. You cannot win their game, but you can win yours. Smart people know not to react, but to respond. Sometimes that response is confrontational, but smart people know that confronting a toxic coworker at the wrong time, in the wrong place, or without backup is a trap, and it's one that their toxic coworker wants them to walk into. So smart people change the game and they make calculated responses. Smart people will never take the toxic person's bait. They gray rock them, becoming emotionally non-reactive. They will not give the toxic person the drama, energy, or attention that they crave. They make themselves boring and they deny the toxic person of what they really want, your emotional labor. Toxic people are performers and they are putting on their best performance to a very specific audience. When you refuse to perform, you ruin their show, because when you don't play along, There is no show. Smart people also know that the fairness principle is obsolete when dealing with toxic people at work. Fairness would require that the deserving person gets the praise, promotion, and pay for their work. Smart people know that this changes the game and they respond accordingly. Most importantly, smart people know it is a waste of time to go to war when the outcome does not matter. I've spoken to way too many people who chose the wrong battles, or they chose every battle when the stakes just weren't there. Smart people save their energy and their attention for the situations that actually move the needle. If you're already typing a comment like,
"You think I'm supposed to let them get away with this?"
you're simply doubting the strategy, and it's probably because you don't know the third strategy to deal with toxic people at work yet. Because the truth is, not reacting is nearly impossible when you're emotionally triggered, which is something that toxic people are experts at doing. Their whole mission in life is to trigger their targets. They know exactly how to trigger you so that you'll react. Toxic workplaces do something so much worse than bringing out the worst in people and enabling toxic behavior. Toxic people have this innate ability to push your buttons and get away with it. The thing is, those buttons are internal wounds. No one can make you feel inferior, inadequate, or unworthy if you don't already have an inner belief system that supports those stories. Those inner beliefs are what drive you to overachieve chronically, seek approval from a toxic boss who's never going to give it to you, or hesitate to speak up because you were taught that you were supposed to be seen and not heard. Smart people make it a priority to deactivate these triggers to stay unbothered at work. This makes the most sense with an example. Of course, I don't want to share the dark inner beliefs of any of my clients, so I'll go ahead and expose my own. I worked with a toxic boss who constantly questioned my abilities. It seemed like their favorite thing to do was to placate their raging sense of inferiority by criticizing my work. It did not matter that I was already an established expert in my field who had rapidly scaled her career at a Fortune 500 company. Paired with psychological abuse, like the time that I was berated for not answering an email when I was at a funeral for an immediate family member, and we're not talking about a great aunt thrice removed here. The criticism was constant, completely illogical, which made it strangely hard to defend, and it was typically about things that I had actually done really well. Basically, my toxic manager was nagging me. What was even more frustrating for me was they falsely equated being critical with critical thinking, but that's a whole rant for another day. For a while, I was able to ignore it, but eventually they chipped away at my confidence in a very specific way at work. When I unpacked the bags after I left that toxic job, it was instantly clear that I wasn't bothered at all by my toxic boss. Frankly, I didn't like or respect them enough for anything that they said to matter. But what was under it was a pattern of being underestimated and people not believing in my abilities. This history and belief system was the only reason why my toxic boss was able to get to me. By unpacking the story and reconciling those inner wounds, I was not only able to recover from the harm my toxic boss did, but I was also able to heal those deep inner wounds, and it has had a profound impact on my life. I'm not the only one who has unlocked the story behind the toxic work experience. So many of my clients have revealed the effect grade school bullying has on their career, toxic relationships, and the trauma that they've had earlier in their careers. Most people think that this is a complicated problem to solve, but it's actually shockingly simple. Though I will admit, emotionally, not always easy. Like mine required a lot of processing, grief, letting go, and radical acceptance. But this is a process that smart people use to free themselves of toxic triggers at work. And the smartest people don't waste time trying to figure it out on their own. They get my Get Over Your Toxic Job guidebook to expedite the process. If you want to snag your copy, you can visit toxicworkplacerecovery.com. The best part of doing this work is when someone tries to provoke you and they can't, you become untouchable. That being said, I want to come back to responding to toxic behavior in the workplace. Sometimes the smartest decision is to let it go because it doesn't matter, and deactivating your triggers is going to leave you less and less bothered by that level of BS. But toxic people sometimes need to be held accountable, especially when it matters. So let's get into the next strategy that smart people use to expose toxic people at work. To be honest, this strategy that is the funnest to use because it's low-key diabolical without actually being diabolical. Personally, I love how it makes toxic people squirm. Smart people know that toxic people thrive in the shadows. If they made their toxicity obvious, they wouldn't get away with it. They need to have plausible deniability, like,
I didn't know, or it was just a joke.
Smart people force them into the light to expose themselves. One way they do this is by working out loud. They regularly communicate their work and their accomplishments, so toxic colleagues can't come along and snatch credit for it, or their toxic boss can't hide them. They find ways to make their work more visible. In instances where they can't, smart people keep their receipts in order. They send meeting recaps, especially when they have to work one-on-one with a toxic coworker. Keeping things in writing creates a paper trail, and more specifically, a paper trail that a toxic person does not want. Smart people also know that toxic people cannot sabotage what they don't have access to, so they limit how much a toxic person can affect them. They don't give toxic people access they haven't earned, whether it's sharing ideas that the toxic person will steal credit for, or details about their personal life that the toxic person has malicious interest in. They detach emotionally from the dynamic as we discussed in the last strategy. Toxic people can't sabotage what they don't have access to. Smart people also know that toxic people at work, in an effort to conceal their toxicity, are incredibly passive-aggressive. They make snarky, backhanded comments. Smart people take them at face value. Here's an example. One of my clients, let's call her Emily, was dealing with a toxic coworker. Let's call her Trisha. One day, Emily was in a team meeting where everyone was trying to brainstorm a solution to a major barrier that the team was facing. The stakes were pretty high and a lot of ideas were being thrown around. Emily had an idea before the meeting even started. She was like 98% confident in it. Actually, it seemed a bit simple to her. It was a little bit obvious, but no one had said it yet. It took a few people sharing ideas for her to muster the courage to speak up and share it. As soon as she said it, Trisha made a snippy remark, something along the lines of,
Like, that's a great idea.
Trisha's snark was not new, and it was not surprising. And before she worked with me, this would have sent Emily spiraling because Trisha reinforced that 2% doubt that she had, and she would have backed down and Trisha would have won. But Emily had done a lot of work to be less bothered by Trisha, and she learned the smart way to respond to Trisha's passive aggressiveness. I am so glad you agree, Trisha. This backed Trisha into a corner, and it forced her to either expose herself or let Emily stage it as agreement. Trisha was not about to expose herself, especially with her boss in the room, who seemed blissfully unaware in Trisha's toxicity in general, but that's again a rant for another day. So she was forced to back down and pretend it was actual agreement. Effectively, Emily used Trisha's passive-aggressive comment to validate her own idea. Now, obviously, it was a good idea, and what I didn't mention earlier was that her boss immediately had a positive signal to it when Emily shared it before Trisha ever said a word. Emily took that moment, though, that Trisha intended to undermine her and used it to bolster her position. Funny enough, the expressed agreement made her boss push further on the idea. In short, Emily won. Your ability to expose toxic coworkers and become immune to toxic people at work is amplified like 100x with the next strategy. It involves doing something that almost every person I talk to avoids with the same energy that they avoid angry hornets. Smart people know that avoiding this one thing will not protect them. Instead, it would make them a target. Smart people do not avoid office politics. They master them. I can literally feel the dislikes every time I say this, but I'm not gonna stop saying it because engaging in office politics is literally how you avoid the BS and position yourself to get exactly what you want at work, whether that's to get your paycheck and go home and be unbothered or to rocket launch up the career ladder. Smart people know their reputation is currency, relationships are insurance, and influence is non-negotiable. Most people have a massive aversion to corporate politics for a simple reason, though. They think that there's only one flavor of office politics.
How will you take your corporate politics? Extra dirty.
And it's not a surprise that most people think that way. Backstabbing, sabotage, and exploitation happen every day in corporations. They're the office politics you've dealt with and have given you countless headaches. So you think engaging in office politics means you have to sacrifice your integrity and sell your soul. And you would if you did it the way that toxic people at work do. The career bestie community refuses to play in the mud with them. And smart people know that that isn't the only way to play the game. In fact, if you play your toxic coworkers game, they've rigged it and you're gonna lose. So smart people play their own game. They set the rules of engagement, They play the game in alignment with their values and with who they are. There are positive and effective ways to engage in office politics without the ick. Ways that are authentic and actually feel good. Because they are. Smart people focus on cultivating relationships first, building actual bonds based on respect, admiration, and mutual benefit, because lopsided relationships where only one person benefits are inherently toxic. They're intentional about their professional reputation. They stay visible, not just busy. In the process, they build their influence and position themselves as untouchable at work. Here's the genius in why it works. When you have advocates in rooms that you are not in, toxic people cannot assail your character. When your work is visible, toxic people can't take credit for it. When you have more influence, you have more power than the toxic people at work. Toxic people know who they can mess with, and they know who they absolutely should not mess with. I want you to focus on becoming the latter, and it's way easier than you think. Just go watch this video next, where I'm going to tell you exactly how to become untouchable by toxic people at work. I'll see you there, bestie.